Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, Coolers, Shills, Desolate, Sirs, Peasants, Vassals. I'm a useful idiot, and today we're going to talk about Italy. And Italy is yet another country that is either in a depression or is heading for depression. And Italy isn't on a lot of people's radars as far as watching for economic collapse, but all the countries in the Eurozone should be one way or another. And things are surprisingly bad in Italy, and we'll examine all the gruesome details, as I say, and we'll decide if they are in a depression or are heading for a depression. So they have their highest unemployment rate in 35 years. Unemployment is at 12.2% by European standards. That's pretty low. But once again, we have youth unemployment of 38.5% and almost 50% youth unemployment in southern Italy. So once again, we have this pivot moment where a generation of European youth are going to be lost to the workforce. 134 retail businesses closing each day. 224,000 businesses have closed since 2008. So here we have another country that is having these feedback loops and having businesses either move out of the country or just close. And so there's not going to be a retail recovery, a retail-generated, a consumer-generated recovery. And that's borne out in the details in Italy when we have an economy that's contracted 7 quarters in a row. So once again, we have obvious example of a country in recessions, but the numbers are certainly edging closer to depression territory. So we also have industrial production at the lowest level in 25 years. So that's bad news for Italy, the third largest economy in the Eurozone. And their GDP is going to shrink 1.8% this year. So they're going to have a huge contraction, and factory output has declined by 25% since 2008. Auto sales are down 17% year over year. So there's a total collapse in the auto industry. So once again, we're going to have more people going on unemployment. We're going to have more people living off government money, and we're going to have more layoffs. We're going to have more feedback loops. The debt to GDP ratio is 130%. So not quite the 170% of Greece's, but you have to remember the size of Italy's economy. So when their debt to GDP ratio is even in the territory of Greece, 130%, it's something we need to be concerned about. So they, just like everywhere else, with all the unemployment rate skyrocketing and more government services being taxed, we're going to have a shrinking tax base, and that creates more feedback loops. Not to mention, there's been a wave of suicides, which is another thing we see in Greece, in Spain, and in Italy, inevitable result of this economic decay and economic collapse. So in Italy, we have a percentage of bad loans in Italy's banks. From 2007, only 4.5% of the loans in Italian banks were bad. And now, in 2013, 12.2%. So we have a similar rate to what we see in Spain, of 11 to 12% of bad loan rates in their banks. So we're going to see further damage upcoming in the Italian banking sector. And in fact, in a note sent out to clients, Italy's Mediobanco warned that, quote, that Italy would inevitably end up in an EU bailout request, unquote, in the next 6 months unless borrowing costs can be kept low and the economy can find some traction. So their economy is not going to find traction, and their borrowing costs are not going to go low. So according to insiders in Italy, they will be looking for a bailout in the next 6 months, and that's pretty staggering. An economy the size of Italy going to be coming for a bailout, And how they're going to structure that is going to be very interesting indeed. And so now we're kind of getting more of a hint that Italy perhaps is in a depression as well. And a good example of that would be from 2000 to 2010, the Italian economy stagnated at the same rate as Haiti and in Zimbabwe, and their GDP has only grown 2.5% in the last decade. So we're seeing Italy's economy grinding to a halt, and if they have more decay in the assets in their banking system, which they will, and then this will be a ripple effect throughout Europe, as it always is. There's a lot more damage to come, and there's pretty much projections are for the next 10 years that they will not have any growth to speak of as well. Not to mention they have an aging population, as in Japan, so we're going to have more people going on government money and less people producing in a very large economy that's contracting anyway. And to bring up another example of what happened in Spain and what happened in Cyprus, Italy also had its bank deposits hit with a one-off fiscal cleanup tax. So there was money confiscated from depositors in Italian banks as well, disguised as a one-off fiscal cleanup tax. So this is a more prevalent practice than has been discussed, but we all kind of knew that that would be the case. And the IMF has slashed growth forecast for Italy, so they're expecting a contraction of about 2%. So that bears out what we know about a potential bailout coming up and Italy going into a depression. And their bonds are rated at near junk status, which is something we're going to see across Europe as well, and we've already seen. And overall output has declined 10% since 2007, so that's why we're not going to see an export-driven, import-export-driven recovery in Italy either. And yet we still have increasing VAT taxes, just like we do in Spain, which is going to only exacerbate the situation there. They cannot continue austerity measures and raising taxes when they're already too high and the economy is suffering. And oddly enough, even Berlusconi recently pushed for the abolition of property taxes on primary residences. So their answer is to cut $7 billion of revenue when all their tax revenue is shrinking anyway. So as usual, the solutions generally are worse than the problems, and Italy is another example of that. So there's a little snapshot of what is going on in Italy, and they're on that fine line between recessions and depression. But by the time the more numbers come out in the next 6 months, or they come to the ECB trough to get their bailouts, it's going to be send shockwaves through the Eurozone, I assure you, and around the globe. So there we have it. We have Spain, Greece, and Italy, all part of the European Eurozone depression. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.